Good morning, everyone. I'm David Dean, K0PWO, member of RMHAM, and just thought I'd go through today some basics on design criteria and maybe some thoughts you ought to think about when designing your own either Go Kit, PODCOM, whatever you want to refer to it as, radio box. I made a simple little PowerPoint presentation. It's more or less just some prompts and notes. It's not really in depth, but I'll go ahead and flip through it as we go through the material here. If someone reminds me here in about 45 minutes or so, we'll take a quick break. Otherwise, we'll trudge right through this as quickly as we can so we can get out to the snow and the sun. If you have any questions, feel free just to ask whenever, and we'll try to answer them at that point. So anyhow, you probably realize RMHAM, we kind of rely on portable communication systems that are easy to set up, from the trailer that RMHAM owns down to the PODCOMs here that we have several versions of. We have a couple others. And keep in mind when you're designing a PODCOM or a portable communication system, you're not just, held to the parameters of putting radios in here. There's PODCOMs that have full-blown repeaters in them that you wheel out, throw down, plug in to a power source. Some of them even have self-contained power sources for a while, and get you on the air or get your system on the air within a few minutes. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do when you
Spacebar.
What's that?
Spacebar.
Spacebar. Okay. The first thing you want to do is develop a design criteria. What do you want this device to do for you? What do you want this PODCOM to do for you, this box of radios or whatever? Is it personal use, so you can go up on a mountaintop and set it on the ground and everything's self-contained, you screw in an antenna cable and you're up and running? Is it more professional use, maybe with ARIES, maybe with incident management, supporting your local agencies, whether they be law, fire, EMS, planned incidents such as walks or bike rides? What are you going to do with it? Is it going to be a combination of both? Is one box going to fit all your needs, or do you need several? Something that you keep in mind when you're building these. Different uses will create, different design criterias, which will guide you in how you put your equipment together and how you interface it within the box and external of the box. Okay, so some of these things, once you've determined, okay, I'm going to build this for hobby use, so I can, when we go camping, the first reason this one was built in its first revision, this is the third revision, and it's getting torn apart here later this year to get transformed again. But the original version, it had HF packet, it had everything under the sun. And so I could take it in our fifth wheel, set it out under the awning, hook it up to my antenna, and while the kids were doing whatever, or in between boating or hiking or whatever, I could get on the air. And that's what it was originally built for. It's been modified a couple times. It's more towards the IMT, law enforcement right now. And like I say, it's about to go through another rendition. This one right here actually drives this one. That cable right there plugs the two together. And this is now my HF part and VHF, UHF. But, once you figure out what you're going to use it for, you start thinking about, okay, what kind of equipment do I want it? Is this going to be a repeater box? Is it going to be HF, full spectrum, UHF, digital communications, data, everything under the sun? Or do you just want something that has UHF, VHF if you go into a shelter and you can set it on a desktop or whatever, and you're in business? Or is this something that needs to be more rugged, that you can put on the bed of a pickup truck, a tailgate of a pickup truck, on an incident command post up at a who knows, a checkpoint or something to a wildland fire, and you're on the air, and it needs to be more suitable for direct sunlight, wind, you know, smoke, everything else. You know, things to keep in mind when you're doing that. Is it HF only? Analog? How about digital voice, since they're becoming more popular? This will design, you know, this will drive the design of your radio selection and everything. Do you need digital modes? Do you need modems, TNCs, sound card interfaces and such as these items right there? Do you need antenna tuners, or does your radio that you're going to use have an antenna tuner? If it is, can it go past 2.1 or 3.1 to 1 and still tune? A lot of them can't. If you're out in the hills, out in the mountains, throwing a wire over a tree, the internal antenna tuner may not do it. You may need an external one. Things to keep in mind when you're designing and picking out the equipment that you're going to use. Here's some more pictures of some that I pulled off the internet, kind of poor quality, but anything from Pelican cases to these 19-inch rack boxes to shock-mounted boxes and stuff. You can select from for designing your system. The next thing, we kind of hit on this already, but antenna tuners, SWR meters, antenna switches, you know, converters, modems, whatever you may need. And this is important because you need to know how much space you need to put all your equipment in and interface it, secure it, so you can grab it, throw it on a cart, grab a friend, and you guys carry it in and throw it down on something, and it's all ready to go. Very popular boxes are these 19-inch racks. They come in a variety of construction methods. These right here are just the basic boxes. They have 19-inch racks front and back, and that's really about it. They have a cover that goes on front and back. You can get them without the covers on the back, a little bit cheaper. Harder to, they're not as flexible when it comes to hooking stuff up and having to repair stuff in the field or whatever the case may be.
They make them shallow also.
They also make them shallow. They make them this size. They make them bigger. They make them with the wheels and the hand. They have wheels and casters on them. Also, there's a couple, I think, floating around RMHAM that are shock mounted. You can buy them shock mounted.
We've got the AC 1000 is in a shock mounted case.
Yeah, shock mounted cases, which are really nice for delicate equipment. Really nice. They're expensive, but they're really, really nice. And keep in mind that you don't have to buy these new. Sources, eBay, Amazon resellers have them. I mean, you can get them off Craigslist. Another place that carries them, but they think they're gold, is music stores, because musicians use these things to mount all their equipment for their bands.
Photo is about the cheapest. B&H Photo.
There's lots of places to find these kind of cases. I just logged on to Amazon and picked one out and ordered them. They're not really that expensive.
What's the good price on something like that?
This one right here probably ran, if I remember right, this thing's like 6 years old, 7 years old. Probably, I want to say $239, something like that.
That
$250.
photo case in the middle there was $179 when I bought it 4 years ago.
Okay, maybe I'm a little high. I'm just going off memory, but this one I know for a fact was in line with that one because I asked you for the recommendations.
And that one in the middle, that's very heavy. That's not something you want.
Yeah.
If you load that up with equipment and a computer and cable, it's a two-man lift. So just be very aware. If you're concerned about something that's mobile, don't make it bigger, make it smaller. You can get two of them.
Yeah. And part of that is the reason this one went down to a smaller footprint. This thing is heavy. It's very heavy. I can throw it up in the truck and move it around by myself, but the little cart right there to bring it into the building, because I wouldn't carry it by myself this far.
So what's the trade-off between like having modular, like an HF box and a VHF box and a packet box, as opposed to like getting a 12U.
Just the trade-off is just how many times you go back to the vehicle and grab it. Because like I say, this one isn't an exact match for this one. They were out of this model, well, this model in that size when I bought it, because my hope was that they would stack and they'd lock into these bars right here so they don't slide off. That was my plan, but they were out of them and I was impatient, so I just ordered that one. But keep in mind that you can make them modular and go with this size. This size right here, I can pick up and take off with. It's not a problem. It's still bulky, but it's nothing like these two are here.
I mean, I've seen RMHAM has an open frame one of those, I think it's an audio rack.
It's a 4-foot
Right.
relay rack with casters on it.
And then Mountain Amateur Radio Club in Woodland Park has what they call Mickey, where they build it themselves out of sheet metal and wow, it's really incredible to look at. And it's packed with everything, and it's on wheels.
Yeah.
But it's really good. But the reason I brought it up is because it's like mission sensitive. You don't need HF for a lot of stuff, but you need VHF and packet, right? So I'm thinking, because I'm thinking for myself, is how do I put this together? You know, in terms of something that's actually portable.
Right, and you bring up a good point, because what if you're going to, it can be a planned incident, it can be an actual incident, doesn't matter. What if you're dispatched to a school or a building like this, and you want UHF and VHF in the more active command area, and you're doing HF WinLink or something else somewhere else, having it break down into two pieces, you can quickly move the HF into a different office. And you still have your VHF and UHF. I mean, that's something to keep in mind when you're designing the system, if it's for something greater than yourself and your hobby uses. You know, like I'm saying, you're going out camping or something, you know, maybe you want something that's self-contained for that. But you know, that's another thing to keep in mind. Maybe you want a packet-only one that's in a 4U, 6U, 8U, whatever size container, and that's your packet station, and then you want your one for UHF, VHF communications, and then you want your HF one. This thing right here, this case was like 99 bucks when it's down to that size. Yes?
What's the generic name of these cases?
This one right here is SKB. This one's Gator. What's yours?
I mean, what do you call, what's the category name?
Rotomold case.
Is that what they are? Okay.
Rotomold, ROTO-MOLD equipment case. And if you put that into eBay or if you put that into Amazon, you're going to come up with lots of those.
You'll come up with pages and pages of options.
They make it
with
from
these
1U all the way to 12U in the portables, and then when they get larger than that, they got handles and inline skate wheels on it.
Yeah, you can get the handles and everything.
I get gun cases.
They're all the same. It's all either SKB or SKB makes most of the ones that I've seen.
Most of the ones, I mean, SKB makes the full line from the little 2U, 4U up to the rolling 48-inch.
That one in the middle is an SKB, I know that, and it looks like yours.
This is an SKB and this is an SKB, I believe. Yours is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do they come with shelves?
No.
No.
No. What you will get is you'll be able to look clear through the front and the back, and you'll see the racks right here. That's all you get, and you get the covers. That's all they come with.
The shallow rack shelves are easily available from Amazon for 15 to 20 bucks a piece with slots in them, and the slots make it really easy for securing things.
Yeah.
Screws.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that in a few minutes when we get to compartment planning and some other areas, but John's exactly right. Go with the slotted shelves, especially if your radios are going to be mounted with the equipment mounting bracket that came with it, or you're going to be building or fabricating your own. Go with the slotted shelves. Also, unless you have a need to go for a full depth shelf, go for like the 6 or 8-inch half shelves. Don't. You'll be happy you did, when you're trying to interface everything in the back and you have shelves in the way
Full
and you
shelves
can't
are
get your
ridiculous.
cables.
Don't do it.
Do not buy the full shelves unless you need it for some reason. Okay, so anyhow, let's talk about picking your radio and your equipment. You know, most of radios today are UHF, VHF that are consumer grade ham radio. Yaesu, Kenwood, Alenco, whoever else makes stuff, ICOM, and you know, such as these. Those are what most ham radio operators use. So when you start selecting your case, keep in mind everything that's going to go in it. Nowadays, a lot of radios have remote heads. That can be a plus when designing these. So, you know, those weren't as prevalent when we started designing some of these, and but nowadays you can stick the radio body in the back and stack them up, make your bracket and stack them up, and then just put the control heads. The previous version of these was totally enclosed in the front. These two spaces were closed off, and I had blanks that were custom cut for my control heads to mount onto the front of it, and so it was totally enclosed. Okay, so there's a lot of options you can do depending on the equipment that you purchase. Another thing, when you're picking out your equipment, it comes back to weight again. Pick out radios that are not, you know, bricks, because these things get heavy really, really, really quick. The smaller consumer grade ham radio, Yaesu, all of them, you can get them in micro sizes. I mean, the actual radio body, you know, is 4 inches wide, 5 inches wide, and an inch thick, 1.5 inches thick. Think about those if you're buying brand new equipment. If you're repurposing older equipment, then obviously you're stuck with what you're repurposing, and you need to plan accordingly, because a lot of the older equipment not only weighs more, it also uses more electrical current, which comes back to planning for your power source, which we'll get to here in a few minutes.
Do you have anything in there about where you get those blank plates or the custom cut plates?
There is a company, and Thursday when I was trying to get my notes together, I looked and looked and looked all over for them. There is a company.
It's Novex.com.
Is it Novex.com?
Yeah.
There's a company that has, they have these 19-inch plates, and they're
Any radio.
they will, if they don't have it in stock, they'll cut it out for you. And it's CNC laser cut, and it's black matted finish, and like these radios would just stick through a plate. And they have the mounting tabs on the back.
That speaker is from them. That's
This one right here?
Yeah, that's from them.
That's one that's that looks like I actually made this before they actually came out with it. This little rendition is about 6 years old, but the company does make it with the exact same speakers now, and it looks identical to this. If I'd known that, I would have patented it and sold it to them. But anyhow, so keep your radios, the equipment you're going to use. Make sure you track your power requirements. That may be critical if you're going to run off solar, if you're going to run off batteries. Okay, if you're running off AC power supplies, car battery with the car running, it's not as critical, but it's something to keep in mind. Keep in mind that weight usually equals more current, and current is what is going to work against you when you're designing your power system. So
Switching power supplies are a good thing and a bad thing.
yeah, we're going to touch on that in a few minutes. Power supplies. The switching power supplies out on the market nowadays are very flexible. They're small. They take up a small footprint. They take up very little weight in your design. However, research them. Some of them are extremely RF noisy. And if you're putting HF in, especially HF with data systems like FT8 or PSK, whatever, they may wipe out your communications from the RF noise. It's something to keep in mind, because keep in mind, your power supply is 1 inch or 2 away from your HF radio in here. It's not spread out in your your ham shack like you may have it at home. So keep that in mind. But power supplies, the next thing I guess we'll touch on for a moment is how are you going to power these things and interface it all. This one right here and this one right here, all the interfacing is done inside, and I can switch here to any of the data modes here. This is hardwired to my TNC. Everything's hardwired here. This cable actually comes out and it goes to my computer, my laptop, so I can interface the data modes. The other thing is I switch one little item and it programs my UHF and VHF radio, the same cable. Okay, so it'll reprogram this one as well as interface into here for packet radio, interface into here for
USB splitters are a really good thing in that case.
Yes.
One cable. The less cables you got hanging out and you have to deal with is good. So putting a USB, like maybe a 4-port or a 5-port in there would be in a lot better shape.
Yeah, this one has a 4-port in it. This one has an 8-port. It's not all being used right now, but it's still in there back from the days that it had HF and everything in it. So keep that in mind, especially if you decide to go with a smaller box, a lower profile box. You still need room for all your interfacing and everything like that. I think John's, for example, John's here has the power supply out front and everything. My power supply is hidden in the back. There's actually in this one, these are half shelves right here, and there's 2 half shelves in the back facing the other way. 2 half shelves in the back hold power supplies and manage cable and stuff like that. Okay, you can see John controls his power supply up in the front. His whole back's opened up. He has no connection points on the back of his, and where this one's totally enclosed. Okay, this one right here, this is how you turn on your power supply on this one. Here's your standard plug to plug into the power supply. This is all wired through a box in the back of the PODCOM. And then I also put out external 12 volts to not only power that one, because that one doesn't have a built-in power supply. So, or it can power some other radio that sets off over here. Doesn't matter, it gives it 12 volts, okay? And as you probably see also when you're planning all your interfacing, these are extensions with jumper cables to all my radios for my antennas. I prefer to go that way. This one has the same setup. This one's also closed off. And you'll see it has jumpers for all my antenna ports. And,
I find that when we take these things out, that use them at a location, that having flexibility to be able to get to the stuff inside is really a good thing. So nothing ever ends up the same way as it started. It all ends up getting refitted.
Yep, and that's a very good point. Mine, I have to take it apart to do anything. I've learned through trial and error where my vents are. Right here. I've learned through trial and error that if I pull those 4 screws, I designed everything so I can get to it through just taking this off. So I have the same flexibility to a point that John has in his. Obviously, John can get in there and move stuff around.
That was my HF Midland gateway until about 6 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, I kind of thought it looked familiar.
It got evicted and brought here, so it gets recabled to do a lot of different things. But we use that at field day and everything else, and you know what happens at field day.
Yeah. This was the FT8 station last year for field day for RMHAM up in the mountains, so they see a whole lot of different use, and like I say, they get modified.
Do you have to run any fans?
I should be, but I don't. That one right there, no, because it's open, the wind blows right through it and keeps it pretty cool.
That thing never gets, the one in the middle never gets out.
This one's never got hot. Okay, this one right here, is a newer version that's only been around for a year, year and a half. And the few times I've headed out camping and such, it's never even gotten warm. But mainly because the bands were dead, and the other thing I'm operating is FT8. And it transmits for 15 seconds every once in a while. And so I've never ran into the problem, but I have thought about it a lot, and it is something to keep in mind if you're going to totally enclose these things, especially if you're looking at one that's going to hold a repeater. You probably want to put some fans on it. They're cheap,
I wouldn't
easy.
enclose one with a repeater either. Keep it open.
Yeah, I'd keep the back open if you could.
We have 2 of them that have SLR 5700 repeaters in them, which is a 1U repeater and then a duplexer. And that repeater running 50 watts into that box on DMR with a really good duty cycle, that box will get 150 degrees in no time. You don't want to close it in.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a few that are enclosed. I think Douglas County has one. And yeah, put some Super Duty fans on there or just leave it open.
We have that one with the 2 UHF and VHF full-size repeaters that's about that long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's enclosed, and they're 25 watt repeaters, and the box is big enough that it really doesn't get hot inside, but you got to definitely think about what your heat switches are.
How do you deal with like dust, snow?
Being enclosed, you don't really worry about it. And the case that we have the repeaters in is watertight, so you put the end caps on, and all the connections are on the side of the box. So it's a completely enclosed environment. You could drop it on a mountaintop, power it up with batteries or solar, and then put your antennas on it. You never have to worry about it.
Yeah, all the when it comes to these kind of Go kits or PODCOMs that have repeaters, all the ones I've seen always have the connections external, so the thing can stay fully enclosed. You can put the end pieces on and clamp it closed if need be, because as John says, if you're dropping it off on a mountaintop with a solar panel hooked in and leaving it, you know, you want it enclosed in case rain or whatever else comes up. So
most of the stuff that we have that have repeaters on are watertight, so that you can put them outside.
okay, so we determined what equipment is going to go into our PODCOM, what all we need to interface it, how we're going to power it, and we're starting to get some dimensions and some measurements on what's going to work for you. And I guess we've covered most of this from questions and such, but from there you want to start thinking about your power system. Probably the most important part of putting one of these together is managing your power. Okay, this box right here, I showed you a minute ago, it has the power supply built in, has the 12 volts, so you can get 12 volts out if you wish. I don't think this one's built this way. This one's just hardwired. This one right here will accept...
There's a powerful adapter in the back.
Right, yeah, I see that. This one right here has gone through the revisions on the power system as well as everything else. This one we put in 12 volts or we put in 110 volts and it lights up. Mine, I was getting all fancy when I built it. And this one in the beginning had a power switching, basically an automatic transfer switch, if you know what that is. If a building such as this has a generator on the outside, the transfer switch transfers power when mains are lost over to the backup generator system or solar system or whatever it may be. So I got all fancy when I was doing this one, and my power supply went into an automatic transfer switch. If I lost AC mains, my power supply for some reason went out, it would switch over to battery backup if I had a battery backup source plugged into my power poles here in the back. It would automatically transfer. It worked rather well. Well, it worked really well. It was cumbersome though, and so West Mountain came out with their isopoles. I strongly suggest if you're going to build one of these and you're putting the power supply inside, spend the $119, and I think I have a picture of them here. This item right here, ISO Power Plus, buy one of them. They come in 3 or 4 different configurations. The one in here is the solar power configuration. This one right here is made primarily for a vehicle. If you lose power, your primary source of power in a vehicle, and you have a backup battery or something like that. But anyhow, this one has one of these in it, and what that does, it has MOSFET switching system in it. And if you lose your primary power, it automatically switches over to my battery backup, my solar power, whatever. When I'm out in the camper or whatever with this thing, I hook it up this into solar panels, which feed my main batteries on my camper. And I have a port with Anderson poles underneath my camper that I plug this thing into, so I don't have to run it off the AC if I don't want to. Anyhow, this thing will transfer power loads back and forth. The other thing is, well, this thing's powered up. If there's with AC, this thing will charge, if you get the right model, it will charge your batteries, your backup batteries, okay? And they're quite handy little devices. They cost about 119 bucks. HRO has them on sale all the time for about $89 or $99.
Don't put them on the radio site, they don't like lighting.
They don't like lighting, but they're fantastic for this use here, or in your vehicle. I have one in my truck actually that backs up one of my radios with a backup battery. But the other thing is isolation. They create power isolation between your batteries and your power mains or your power supply. Yes, you can hook up your battery in parallel with your power supply and let it run. It's not good engineering practice. You can do it, it will work. However, you're better off having some isolation of some sort. Whether you build it yourself with some diodes and rectifiers, or whether you buy one of these, or you use some other method, always keep in mind power isolation if you have more than one way of feeding your PODCOM without the ability to get in the back and switch it manually. Like this one, you'd have to take it apart. It's a really good feature, it's handy, and it's a good part of power management when it comes to your system, because the last thing you want to happen when you're out on an incident or you're at a bike race and your PODCOM's the main source of communications, and it goes down because you lost the power. You know, you lost AC, someone kicked out your cord or whatever in the heck happened. You know, the last thing you want to do is go down. So keep in mind these when you're designing your system. Other power management, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, are Anderson power poles. There's a wide variety. Something to keep in mind when you're designing your PODCOM, especially if you're going to use it for planned incidents or ARIES or something like this. And I'm not saying that the government follows Anderson power poles, and the feds definitely don't. So if you're on an incident like that, you wouldn't be providing communication systems anyhow, but Anderson power poles are the standard in most ARIES applications. Most people use Anderson power poles. If you don't design your box internally with power poles, at least have a jumper or an interface cable that you carry in your kit so you can interface into someone that does. Because I can guarantee you, if Arapahoe County shows up, Douglas County, Jeffco, Boulder, anybody shows up on some kind of event, they will have power poles, and their power sources will have power poles. If they have backup batteries that sit on the floor, they will hook in through power poles. I'll guarantee it. Other methods that you can use within your box, I mean, these are the popular ones, the rig runners. These are handy as can be. The only difference between this and a rig runner is this has individual protection, fusible protection. These do not. So if all your power cables have fuses in line, save yourself a few dollars and some space and some weight and go with one of these. They come in 4 and 8 pole configurations, pretty much just like the rig runners. They weigh maybe 1/8 of what that thing does. That doesn't sound like much when this is mounted on your desk or something in the house, but when you have that, power supplies, radios, antenna tuners, SWR meters, TNCs, everything else, it quickly approaches, 75 pounds, like this one, 80 pounds. But these right here are the handiest thing in the world. This right here was the first version. It works okay. I'll tell you right now, it's a total bitch to cut that square hole exactly and get it to snap in there. You can't have any slop. If it does, it pops out. So it is a pain in the ass to get those in. These right here are new on the market from a couple years ago. They weren't around when that was originally built. I don't have it on this one. Okay, I have the square one on that one. Something else that I have the round one. The round ones work fantastic. You drill 7/8 inch hole or 1.25 inch, something like that, snap it in, screw on the nut, and you're in business. It has power poles on the back side, so all you do is have a jumper cable. And it has two power pole connections on the back side, so you can actually run it to two separate items with inside your box. So you have some versatility. These are not interconnected in any way. Keep that in mind when you design everything. So another method you can use, if you don't want to go the power pole route because of the cost, these things are pricey. I realize that. Even one of these is around 45 bucks. So if you want to go a little cheaper, I didn't get a picture, but if you know what a terminal strip is, they're black Bakelite strips of all different lengths from 2 to, I've seen them as long as 48 poles wide, and they'll have 2 screws with little barrier guards in between each set of screws, so you can put spade connectors or wire connectors on each side and they transfer it through. This was originally built with terminal strips. It's now got rig runners in it and one of those. But that's a cheaper way of doing it. It's sturdy, it's mechanically sound, it works great, takes up a lot less space, and they don't weigh anything. And it's easy to crimp on the little spade connectors and the eyelet connectors onto the back of your wires when you're making your interconnection cables. Something to keep in mind for the inside, because if you're enclosed like this one, there's no reason to have these high-end, high-priced items for just power management inside. I would still go with the ISO port, but other than that, barrier strips are fine. If it's open like John's is here, and it's got the rig runner here.
That one was glued down, but the double stick tape doesn't work well.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute here too. Structural integrity. But
Scott loves the double stick tape.
yeah. As you see right there, it doesn't work. As I learned with this one, it doesn't work. You can put, what's that?
Screws.
Screws? Yeah, screw them on. But we'll get to integrity here in a few minutes. But other items on power management: fuse everything.
And bring spares.
And bring spares. Bring lots of spares. Gen sets on command post incidents, whether they're planned, whether they're natural or whatever, get power bumps and power spikes continuously. People plug in, unplug, the generator idles down, the frickin' school has a brownout for a second or has a spike because a power pole just burned down, feeding one of their grids. Whatever the case may be, your power quality is an issue. So make sure you have fuses, because you would rather have the little fuse go than your whole radio get toasted. But another thing is John's, with the open design, that's another thing that's handy, is he does blow a fuse. It's 2 seconds and he's back in operation. This one, it's 4 screws and poking around trying to find my rig runner in there without taking the whole thing apart.
That's why the
To,
with the light behind the fuse, when it goes up, it's so nice.
Oh yeah, the rig runners, that is a handy feature, how they light up.
The ones that we put in the trailer are the 80 amp, and they're double-sided. They've got 2 sets of 8, and every one of them has an LED behind the fuse. So when you pop it, the LED comes on, and that's really handy when you're stuffed in a closet or inside a little tiny box, so that you can see which one is gone.
Yeah. All of mine, all the rig runners I use, they now have that feature on just about every one of them that I'm aware of, whether they're 20 amp or 80 amp. I'm pretty sure they have it on all of them. The LED is actually inside the slot on the circuit board, so you have to, but it shines through. It there's no problem telling you have a blown fuse on that slot. Let's take a break for a couple minutes. I gotta drink some more tea here before my voice fails. Unless anybody has any quick questions or anything.
So let's come back about 5 after.
Okay, here's the slide of the different kind of cases. As you can see, they come in this polycarbonate stuff like these are. You can get them in metal, either metal ends for additional support. You can even get the cases made of aluminum. Here's a shock mounted case on wheels. You can get them without the wheels, but these are nice because they move totally independent. They're on springs in all corners. They're nice cases. They're very expensive. Here's some of the cases that have the wheels built in and the handles, and they actually make this model and this model with wheels now and the handles. They're very handy for heavier applications. This right here is more in line with that one. This is actually military grade, and they're actually a different kind of material. They look like this, they feel like this, but the material's a lot thicker, a lot more dense, and they're very, very, very heavy. But they're made to be driven over and everything else under the sun. Some of the here's a faceplate from the company that John was referring to, and maybe John will put a link or something on the website to the company that makes these. They'll make anything you want. You just tell them which radio it is or what device it is, what accessory it is, and they'll build it for you with or without the grab handles. Here's the shelves. This is a more in line with the full depth shelf, but the point is here is the slots. Believe me, go with the slots. You don't want to go with the solid.
And I noticed some of them that's got the lip on the front.
Mm-hmm.
I find you can get them without the limp.
Yep.
Lip, so sometimes you got to be careful with what you're mounting that it's
Yeah.
not going to hit the lip.
It's a very good point. The lip has gotten in the way. I don't remember if these have lips right now or not. Yes, they do. They've been in the way on other applications before. So you can buy them without the lip or with the lip. The lip makes them more, gives them more strength and more integrity. So keep that in mind depending on what you're putting on there. Here's the blanks. They come in every width imaginable. 1U, 2U, 3U, 4U. And they're handy for if you want to close it off. This one is closed off with blanks. This right here, like I was telling you earlier, this started out as a blank, and I drilled all the holes and put the speakers. You can actually buy that from that company now. They build those in 1, 2, 3, and 4 speaker configurations. Hey, John, I was thinking sometime would you put a link on the website for the company that does these cutouts for me? Thank you.
As soon as I get my laptop back.
Yeah, as soon as you get that back. Okay, and something we already passed over is power poles. They're the standard. This is the tool, if you're not familiar with power poles, that crimps them together. HRO has kits for them, or you can buy the tool individually. And the different power poles, we've kind of covered that already. But
Make sure you put your power poles the right way.
oh yeah. And another item that I found power poles, if you go to HRO, they'll have a pack of 15 amp power poles, and they're multicolored. Instead of the red and the black, they come with a pink one, they come with yellow ones, purple, gray, blue, everything but red and black. And you might say, what would I use those for? But what I found, Motorola, for one, and I assume there's other companies that do it, they have their specialized little proprietary connectors for like their speakers, which just doesn't work with anything else. But Motorola speakers are really nice to have for communications equipment because that's what they're designed for. And you can get them for $10 a dozen, the older Spectra and MyCore and stuff like that. Era speakers are fantastic speakers. So anyhow, the point is I buy these packs and I get the blue and the yellow, And I cut off Motorola's proprietary connector, and I use power poles to interconnect my speakers. And I use blue and yellow or whatever color, it doesn't matter as long as it's not black and red, so I don't accidentally hook power to it. And I know if it's a color other than black and red, I can connect them together. They can be used for a wide variety of other things because the power pole does not have to be just 2 connectors wide. It can be 6 long, or it can be 2 pairs, you know, layer after layer after layer of pair, and connect them together.
You can turn them opposite of each other too.
You can turn them opposite of each other. They're very versatile. Keep in mind their versatility when you're designing all your interconnects inside, because you can match the colors up, and in a second you can be, you know, retransforming the connections inside your PODCOM, your station, your vehicle, whatever it may be. It's just kind of a tip.
In RMHAM, we use red and black for 12 volts and yellow and black for 24. So we can always tell what we're plugging into.
Yep. I mean, there's all kinds of uses for those little connectors. If you want to get away from Molex and all these other specialized connectors, keep that in mind when you're designing not only your PODCOM or your Go Kit or whatever, but even your normal day station accessories. If you need to be able to switch between things, just have them color coded and snap them together.
100 of those is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it's like 25 bucks, 30 bucks, something like that. Handy little devices, but keep that in mind. And we already talked about the power supply and the transfer switches and knowing your power draw. Also keep in mind when you're designing your PODCOM, how are you going to power this thing? We've talked about it a little bit. You know, is it 120 volts only? So is it a power supply that you either turn on in the front or plug into in the back? Is it an external power supply feeding it? So is it 12 volts? So do you need power poles or some kind of connector on the back to feed it a 12 volt source, whether it be a car battery, whether it be a running vehicle, whether it be a solar array, or whatever the case may be. Keep all those things in mind when you're starting to put all your material together and your design criteria. Like we spoke about before with the West Mountain ISO power, are you going to build in a transfer switch capability? I highly recommend it. It's great to be able to be plugged. If you have, let's put it this way, if you have a power supply internal to your PODCOM, I would recommend it, because having the ability for a battery on the outside in case you lose power or something is huge. And you'll be like the hero if power goes down, that say the generator goes down, that's running the command post or whatever, but you keep operating and you keep two-way communications going. It's huge. You'll be the hero, I'm telling you, if that happens. And
get into some of the battery considerations, because a lot of the solid-state radios, you get much below about 11 volts, and some of them will do a reset, especially HF and some things. I know there's some power boost considerations.
Yeah, when it comes to powering this thing with a battery, I wasn't really planning on going into that, but we can stop and talk about it. If you're going to use battery power, and it's independent of your car sitting there and saying you don't have a pair of alligator clips that go to your battery post and then a long cable that comes over and plugs into this thing, what are you going to use? There's batteries, there's lead acid batteries, there's AGMs, and the other major battery for powering communication systems nowadays is lithium. And they all come in battery that you're familiar with, the big rectangular square battery with the 2 posts on top. AGMs are sealed. They're better known in the marine and solar and wind turbine world, where they're maintenance free and they have deep cycle capacity, meaning they don't just give a burst of amperage, high amperage to start a car or start an engine, and then they're done for until they're recharged. Where AGM deep cycles, they're like the batteries, your Energizer batteries you put in your camera or whatever. They cycle down to a certain point until they get too low to work anymore, and then they need recharged back up. AGMs, if you're building a PODCOM and you want battery backup, or your battery supply is your main source of power, I would suggest you go after lithium, which are pricey, or AGM batteries, deep cycle. They're also known in some areas, like if you go to AutoZone or something, as marine deep cycle. Some of those will be AGM. Some of those will be lead acid though. So you gotta keep an eye out on that. A big maker of AGM batteries is the Red Top. Who makes those? I can't remember their name right.
It used to be Gates, it's now Optima.
Optima?
Yeah.
Yeah, Optima makes the red and yellow tops. Go with the red tops. What do we have on the trailer? Are they?
They're GMB cell site batteries. They used to be yellow tops.
I knew we went to something else, but we used to use the yellow tops, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're too expensive for what you get now.
Yeah, no.
It's ridiculous.
That's freaking no kidding. If you come across some cellular antennas, some backup antennas at a good price that are being pulled out due to maintenance, histories, meaning they've been in use for however long, and so they get them switched out, take them up on it if you can get them. And if you can get the ones that you can actually carry by yourself, because most of them are too heavy. But if you ever come across those, take advantage of it if they're at a good price. So anyhow, the batteries, back to the batteries. I've seen a couple of these PODCOMs that have the batteries, self-contained batteries, and that's lugging a lot of weight. I've also seen some that I've seen pictures of them where they have a smaller case like that is nothing but the battery. And the reason they put it in there is they have the handle and they can grab it and they can walk off with it, and it has power poles or some kind of external power connector, and they hook the two together. The military is big on that. They have some of those for when they're getting their equipment set up. They hook into the batteries, they start getting their satellites linked up and all their communications running while they're still setting up their solar arrays or their generators or whatever. They'll have some, and they'll be in a matching case just like this, and 4 guys will carry it in, and they'll set it next to all the radio equipment, and that'll serve as their UPS system in case they lose their gen set or their solar array or whatever it may be, until they can get it back online. But so you're looking at, once again, you're looking at AGM deep cycles, the standard lead acid, which is in every one of your cars probably, or a lithium, which are great batteries. They put out a lot of power for a lot less weight, but they're extremely expensive. And if you're going to run in batteries, we got to think about how are you going to replenish the battery as your incident is going on, or as your hobby communications are continuing up in the mountains or whatever they may be. Solar, I'm big into solar, mainly because we use it in RMHAM. I use it in parts of my everyday job, and I'm a big solar proponent. It doesn't take much nowadays to go down to Harbor Freight and buy their camper special, which is always on sale for like $109 or $119. And what you get is 2 panels or 4 panels, depending on the pack. You get the charge controller, and you get interconnecting cables, and some of them even come with a light bulb. And I don't know what the light bulb's for other than to prove that it actually works. But I don't know, because there is no use for it. But for $129, you can't beat it. The things a lot of them come with tripod stands that flip out, and you can set the thing at whatever angle, cut off their connector cable or build your own, which is even better, and build a jumper cable that has your power poles or whatever your connector of choice is. Plug it into your charge controller. Your charge controller goes to your battery, and your charge controller then goes to your radio, and you're up in business. It will actually pull power off the solar panels if the solar panels can supply the desired requirements for the operations of the radio. If they fall short, then the charge controller automatically turns on the source to the batteries, and the batteries supply whatever's needed to make up the difference. They work really good. They're a great source of charging your batteries as you go throughout the incident. And they're cheap. They truly are. Those little kits are cheap. Harbor Freight's not the only place to get them. There's other places online that have the same kits. Amazon has tons of them. And that's one way of backing up your battery. The other way is charging it with your vehicle. The other way is wind turbines, water turbines, stuff like that, but that's beyond the scope of this. But battery management, power management, that's one of your most crucial aspects of designing these things. If you don't design enough power for your radios to operate, then obviously you're not going to be operating very much. So.
What about the other thing that Mark mentioned, those power boosters that takes 12 volts up to 14 volts?
Oh, the power boosters. I've never, in the battery world, I've never messed with any of those. Is there anybody that has experience with those? In the commercial world and my normal day-to-day, we use a boost, we call them buck and boost transformers, but that take, say, you're using a 6-volt battery, it'll boost it up to 14 volts or something like that. They're out there on the market. I don't have any experience with them. I do know they work. I know an application that they're used in all the time is the police vehicles and fire vehicles, because the laptop runs off 18 volts generally, that run their CAD systems and everything in their patrol cars. Those actually run off 18 volts. Well, how do you run that off a 12-volt vehicle? And it's because the power supply that a Panasonic and a couple of these other companies, Toshiba, who's another maker, their power supplies have buck and boost. I call them buck and boost transformers, but in the DC world, they're called something else. But is that what they are? They take 12 volts and they have a circuit in there, and I'm guessing it's a transformer and a bunch of capacitors that boost the current and the voltage up to 18 volts with a good amount of current to run whatever the device is. But those are used in all police cars, all fire trucks, everything. That's how they run their Panasonic laptops. So they don't have to have 110 volt inverters inside. So, but that's all I know about them. And in the DC world here that we're talking about.
They're really inefficient.
They're inefficient? Oh yeah, they're hugely, that's the other thing. They're hugely inefficient.
You
I mean,
run them if you're in a solar constrained environment, because you're going to just eat your solar reserves making power.
oh,
Trying to get something that matches.
Yeah, they're better than inverters, but.
oh,
I think they were claiming like 93, 94% efficiency on a couple I read, but the guy that used to sell the one that was pretty common, I think he passed away last summer, so I think the only thing you're left with now is most likely MFJ, and I've heard a lot of issues with MFJ.
Mighty fine junk.
yeah, are we talking issues just with the up converters or everything they make? Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the problem basically is if you're trying to run 100 watts out of your HF rig, you pretty much have to have pretty good power, short leads and thick wires, because if you have any losses at all, suddenly you're down to 11 volts and the radio starts cutting out.
Exactly, yeah. In a situation like that, if you needed 14 volts and you only had 6 or 8 volts available to you and you used one of those for an HF rig that's spitting out 50% duty cycle at 100 watts, it's not going to work. It's not going to work unless the thing's backed up by an alternator in your car or something like that. It's just not going to work. Those things aren't efficient enough to do that.
But some of
I mean,
those new lithium phosphate batteries, they've got a pretty sharp curve that they'll, I mean, the West Mountain, you can set the proper charge for those, but pretty much they'll say, you can get a little over 12 volts, and when it goes down, it just pretty much
it cuts it off
real quick, rather than go down to 10 and to 9.
and as I recall, those are user adjustable in some way, aren't they? You can set them to what you want, or do they come pre-adjusted?
The ones that I played with come pre-adjusted, but they need a little more voltage to charge. But, again, they're lighter weight, but they're more expensive.
Yeah, there's always a trade-off when it comes to weight versus expense. Okay, another point was brought up during that conversation regarding the wire. That's another thing to keep in mind when you're designing these things. 100 watts, obviously, at 12 volts takes a lot more current than your 2-meter rig running 15 watts at 12 volts. Proper wire sizing. Keep in mind, I mean, typically you're going to be using no larger than 10 gauge in one of these things. Keep your wires short. Keep your wire length short if you can, which is a good practice for anything. Obviously, you're not running far inside of this, but it quickly becomes a rat's nest with all your interconnecting cables if you don't, manage your wire runs. Keep in mind, the thickness. If you're running 100 watts, 12 gauge will do it for a typical 100 watt radio. 10 gauge is better. Step up a little bit and run a little bit bigger wire if you're going to run 100 watts to an HF transceiver. Everything else you can get by with usually 12 gauge or most of these, like one of these radios here. You can go down to 14 gauge, but keep in mind, research your wire sizes and what their current capability is. Remember the wire sizes are governed by amps, the ability to carry amps. 12 gauge is generally good for 20 amps. It's really good for about 23 to 24, but we keep it at 20 amps. 14 gauge is 15, 10 gauge is 30. You can pull 35 out of it though easily before it starts getting warm. But keep that in mind when you're designing your power system. You don't want your wire to be your weakest link just because you're just being cheap and this is what you had in your box. And so you grabbed it and used it and you ended up using 16 gauge for 100 watts. It'll get warm. It'll choke off your power to your radio. So keep that in mind. Short runs, however, managed runs. If you have to add a little bit of extra wire inside to manage it, do it. Another reason the slotted shelves are good, wire ties. Everything's managed here. Power management is your biggest concern when designing these things. Your second concern is the management and the durability and the mounting methods you use for mounting your equipment. These shelves, as you can see, give a little bit, but not much. Mount your equipment, hard mount it. If you have, I don't know, is this thing mounted with double-sided tape or Velcro?
Screws.
The HF is? Oh, okay. Hard mount everything. I can't stress that enough. These things are made to be portable. Take out in the field, bounce around in your truck or in your car, whatever. Be dropped by someone helping you carry it up to the command post, whatever. Don't use double-sided tape.
You'll see what happens.
Don't use heavy-duty Velcro. It doesn't work. This one has had heavy-duty Velcro in it before. The radio came off when it was being transported into the fairgrounds.
When Velcro gets warm, it delaminates wherever you stuck it to, so don't use it.
Don't, I can't stress it enough. We've all, you see the aftermath right there. I can verify the aftermath of when I tried it a couple times. It doesn't work. These boxes get warm inside, either from the sun pounding down on them or the equipment operating. Like John says, they delaminate, it comes off, and all of a sudden you're picking it up and things are banging around inside. Take the time. Power supplies, they don't come with mounting brackets. It doesn't take much to go down to Home Depot and buy one of their 3-foot strips of metal and bend it and build your own mounting bracket. Typically,
Scott actually took the power supply apart, drilled a couple of holes in the bottom and bolted it through, and then put the power supply back together.
Yeah.
He put it together with the shelf out of the cabinet, which don't try to do it while it's in there.
Yeah, that's another method of doing it. And actually, the power supply in this one's done the same way. I took it all apart, mounted it to the shelf, and then put it all back together and mounted it in there. Because there's not a way of doing it otherwise, other than building your own bracket. When you build a bracket, you're going to build a little strap that goes around the top, down the sides, and then it has little ears that screw down into your shelf. It's not hard to build them. Don't use plumbers' expandable, holy frickin' strap that they use to hold your water pipes up in your house and stuff, that stuff doesn't work, it stretches. It's made to stretch, it's made to expand and contract. Don't use it. I've tried it before, it doesn't work. So don't use it.
Aluminum brackets, aluminum angle. Steel is not necessarily the best because of weight.
Mm-hmm.
Go get friendly with Alrico and Brighton. They'll be very happy that you did.
Oh, if you get serious into something, yeah, El Rico. Otherwise, if you're just building a little strap, just go to Home Depot. But El Rico, if you need a lot of aluminum, they're the only place to go.
And one thing that I found with using the shelves is, you know, even going through mine, it was, you know, it was a several month project, and I'm still working on it. Is with the shelf, it's easy to kind of pull it out and make a modification, put it back in so you can kind of build as you go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one thing that got me was with the radio brackets and trying to get the screws back in. Sometimes that can be, I found it can be tricky, or you may have to drill a hole in the side of the panel to get a screw in, just because you can't get to all of the screws if you want to get two radios side by side.
Yeah, we've learned, just like John mentioned, just like Scott learned, we have learned through trial and error and our own experience, this whole assembly, this is an assembly that can come out with these 4 screws, and it comes out. Everything's managed, all the wiring, whether it's an antenna cable, whether, it doesn't matter what it is, an interconnecting cable to a TNC, it's speakers, whatever it may be, the mic jacks, the earphone jacks, whatever. Everything is managed and is one piece, and it's built outside this compartment. So this thing's sitting on a workbench. I mount all the brackets, I mount all the radios, I mount all the cables, I zip tie them all down, I strap them all down, I interconnect everything, and then I strap everything down again, and then I slide it in there and try to hold it up or have someone hold it up and start the screws and then screw the screws in. That's how it's built. And then you come around the back and you'll just have little pigtails to the antenna, to the speakers, to the power poles, and that's how we build them. And we spent time trying to build these things in place and replace things out in the field with it in place. It just doesn't work. Build the whole thing as a sub-assembly. It slides in. In John's case, it's unclick, unclick, unscrew. This one, it's pull 4 screws, unplug, unplug, unscrew, and the thing comes out. And that's the only way to do it. Another thing is versatility. If you have several of these shelves pre-built with different configurations, and you're going to do something else or something's coming up, and you don't need the DMR, you need 2 sets of VHF, UHF, ham grade transceivers, you have that shelf already built up with its couple of pigtails sticking out. Pull this one out, unplug, unplug, unscrew. Slide the new shelf in real quick, plug, plug, screw. Boom, you're reconfigured, you're out the door. And it's ready to go. Other ones we've seen, so they'll have this, they'll have their packet station. Say you have something, a walk coming up and you need packet, you slide your packet shelf in. You don't need DMR, you slide your packet shelf in and you need VHF, UHF on this shelf. Keep in mind, for 15 to 30 bucks for a shelf, most of my half ones with slots are about 15 bucks, 18 bucks. You can have 4 or 5 of those sitting around with different configurations. If you have the equipment laying around that's spare, you can have the configurations built and slide them in there. They can set up on your, another thing is these shelves can actually set up on your ham shack and be used every day. And you need that particular area of communications. You unplug it from your ham shack, you slide the shelf in, you screw it down, it goes with you. You're gone. You're going camping for the weekend. Pull the shelves off out of your ham shack, slip them into your box, plug them in, and you're gone. That's how versatile these things can be made. But the big thing you need to do is structural integrity of mounting the equipment to whatever you're using, whether it's a shelf or a blank face, and manage your wires. Manage them, manage them, manage them. I don't know how many times I've opened this frickin' thing up because a DIN connector wiggled out while it's being transported back and forth. It happens all the time. The DIN connectors come out quite a bit. The power poles will even come apart sometimes. They'll vibrate out. They're not supposed to, but I've had a couple of them do that. And adapters. The other thing is adapters. This USB to serial adapter to control the radio, make sure you screw them in. They will bounce out the first time you transport the vehicle. I mean, transport the PODCOM. You know, I can't stress it enough. Make sure all your antenna connectors are tight. Power poles, if you have some power poles that are just flying freely in the air that you can't manage real well for some reason and they're jumper cables, tape them together. Put a layer of tape around them.
Really good too.
What's that?
The small wire ties, they go through the holes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The other thing is, if you go to Home Depot or you go to Harbor Freight, they make these super tiny frickin' zip ties, wire ties, and they go through the holes perfectly. They zip it together and it holds the power pole together.
They also make little power pole plugs that go on either side of them.
Yeah.
Like little finger things, but those are really expensive compared to the price of a wire tie.
Yeah, oops. This thing right here, well, you can connect two together and they will stay together. Or, like we talked about before, if you had built some that have 6 or 7 or 8 power poles on each side that do an accessory cable, those things will hold them together, or the wire ties will. I prefer the wire ties because I carry tons of those every day for other things. But anyhow, that's what I'm going to say about integrity. Just make sure you take the time to manage everything, strap it down. Don't use Velcro, don't use double-sided tape. Structurally mount everything. The easiest way is with the mounting brackets. Do you have yours? I don't know if those are on mounting brackets.
We made a mounting bracket for the signal link, but everything else is bolted through.
Right, yeah. The mounting brackets that come with the equipment work just fine. Another thing to keep in mind structurally, if you're using like mounting brackets that came with the radio or ones that you made yourself, with the slotted shelves, they're a little more flexible than the solid shelves are for obvious reasons because they're missing material where the slots are. Use some fender washers. It will strengthen your connection points where you tie your screws through. It will strengthen it amazingly well. You'll be surprised how much stronger it is. Use some fender washers, 1/4 inch, 5/16, whatever you need, whatever hardware size you use, and it'll strengthen up those shelves and they won't flex as much. The slotted ones do flex a little bit.
As you can tell by the middle one there, how that middle shelf sags a little bit, same problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can go with the, go ahead.
I have a question on audio.
Mm-hmm.
The center unit has one audio speaker, I assume mostly because the top 2 Motorola's probably blast fine loud enough, and that's specific up to the HF.
Mm-hmm.
How do you hook up audio on your small unit to your big unit?
This one here?
Yes.
Oh.
I don't see any speakers on that smaller unit, but you say you tie in power to that via
Yeah,
your
this.
bigger unit. So I assume when you go camping, you take both units? Or how do you first of all, how do you put power to that?
If I go
unit?
camping, I just take this one. And like I said, my camper underneath, I have a waterproof enclosure like you see for a switch or for an outlet. And one of them's a data port. If I open it up, one is a data port on the bottom and the upper one's a power pole. And I just have a longer 10 gauge cable that I carry with me.
Use a headset for...
No, surprisingly, this one right here, there is a plug back here for it to plug into there that takes it to one of those speakers if I need it to. This thing's loud enough. And the thing is when I work HF, sideband or CW, I use headphones constantly. And there's a cable, you can't see it, there's this little manager right here that usually has my connector for my mic and everything for my headsets to connect to, but it's while transporting, it's coming out of this and it's slid in the back right now, so I have to fish it out again. But there's actually a Heil connector that connects to my headsets, and I use headsets all the time. This one right here, puts out enough speaker noise, I don't need a speaker for when I'm out camping and stuff like that. That's not the case when this is in an incident command post and it has the speakers. And like you said, your comment was correct. These two have forward firing speakers, so we don't put a speaker on there. This is strictly for the HF rig that John put together that way. This one right here, even though these have forward firing speakers, they go through these. And the reason they go through those, because right here, these are headphone plugs. And if I plug in, it cuts out my speakers. Okay, and same thing with this right here. This goes up to a speaker right here, but it goes to a connector in the back that goes to a pair of headsets with a foot switch. Since it's more dispatch oriented for P25, I just built it that way. Whether it's right or wrong, I still am up in the air because some people just can't get used to it that use the thing, and others can. So, and since this box right now is configured for me to throw it down somewhere for other people to use and me to walk away from, that's created kind of a problem. So I don't know if that was the right way to go.
One of the things that we did when we started building these PODCOMs in 2013 after the fires is when hands show up at a command post, they like to take their equipment with them when they leave. So these were built so that we always have a fixed set of equipment that we can leave and walk away from. It's just one of those things that you always want to think about taking your stuff with you when you leave, but you have setup and teardown time that really impacts things when you're trying to operate a real event. These things make it really easy to just leave it, don't mess with it, but then you have the training issue. How did this all go together? So simple, label, make everything as clean and simple as possible. And that's another one of the reasons that I left the back off of that one, because anybody can look and go, oh, it's wired to here, okay.
Oh yeah, and it's also clearly labeled. That's another thing, label everything, because as John says, this one right here and this one right here, they're made to be left. This one, while it's been in this configuration, which has been about, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years, I've yet to operate it, but it's got probably 500-600 hours of operating time on it, and I've never even operated the thing. I go and drop it off and I leave it, and then I come and pick it up, or someone drops it off to me when they're done with it. And same thing with this. I mean, it's made to be left, just like John says, and make it simple. And if you do something for an incident management or something like that, make sure you make it idiot-proof, because you don't know who's operating the thing. And like most people, or a lot of people, aren't familiar with these radios at all. They may know this one. This one's kind of an oddball, even though it's a popular Yaesu radio. It's still kind of an oddball. I don't see many out there in the field or in other people's vehicles and stuff, but make sure you make it simple to operate. Yeah, well.
So this is a little bit of a side argument, but I find it extremely frustrating dealing with a DMR radio that doesn't have the RMHAM code plug in it, where you can't find in what freaking zone is the channel that you're looking for. Can we please come up with the standard set of zones that I can anticipate where things are if I can't dial?
If you can't have that, you should have a list of what's in your code plug laminated in the box.
Yeah, I took it out because it fell out, but usually right here, there's usually, it sits right in here, and there's a couple of little flex bar things that go across here, and it holds the manuals for the radios that are contained in the box, and it has the, what's that?
The top two radios in the middle, those are 32 channel radios. And none of our code plugs are written for the 32 channel radios.
Oh yeah, these.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing, I have my manuals, and then I have a booklet that has the code plug printed out, easy to read, zones, and, but I know what your point is there, Willem. You'll never see, I can't say you'll never see. I mean, I can dump in any code plug you want me to in there in a second. But none of my radios have ever conformed to the RMHAM way of thinking, because I don't agree with a lot of it, how it's built up. But these two radios are built on the basis of the RMHAM code plug, such as, you know, the 448 repeaters, and then the 449 and the 444 and 445. You'll see all that list, and you'll see all the red cross. You'll see all the stuff that's in the RMHAM basic code plug, and then you'll see 15 other zones after it that are customized in because they're customized in IMT and incident management, all the, you know, fire freaks. I mean, especially in the VHF, it has all the wildland fire freaks that I can get my hands on. It's got all the interops. It's got everything under the sun out of the interop booklets and everything like that, which I know some of the RMHAM code plug has a little bit of that too, but it has nothing like the ones that we built for the trailer and that we built for these things. But yeah, normally inside my case there is booklets and printouts and everything else, so I can leave it there and people can go, okay, what zone is it in? But the other thing is, if I drop this on a planned event and they tell me, they give me a 205 in advance, I build a zone for that 205 and I lock the frickin' rest of the radio out, so they can't get into the other zones and all of a sudden start talking on something they're not supposed to. And if this thing, say it's going to the fairgrounds for the fair in Arapahoe County, I'll reprogram the radio the day before it goes with Special Ops 1, which is the fairground channel, and ACO 1 and METCOM. ACO 1 and METCOM will be receive only, and Special Ops will have transmit capability, and that will be the only zone that I leave in the radio, because the last thing I need is them coming up on Blue Northeast during a drug interdiction raid and start transmitting, because it's happened. So that's when I learned, and it didn't happen on my radio, it happened on ACO's portable that they supplied before I supplied this to them. With the P25, they supplied us portables, and one of the guys picked it up and he had been playing with the radio and it was on Blue Northeast or Northwest or something like that, and they were doing some kind of surveillance, and all of a sudden he's calling Team 1 or something like that over the DTRS. So yeah, I kind of manage that a little bit, and I'm sure John does too before he drops it off. Just so
pretty much everything that goes out on the 205 is plugged into the radios before it gets there.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever updated the 205 for this one after it's been dropped off, unless something extreme changed. But it was following the 205 that was provided before it was dropped off. Okay, other items I guess we're going to think about is that we haven't touched on really is your interconnections for all your data. How are you going to program the radios when they're inside this box if they're not front panel programmable? These are front panel programmable, so are all of these. That one is not, and this one is not. So once upon a time, these keystones that are on this one, I put this in here so I could be flexible in building programming cables, because beforehand this had radios in it that were ham grade, and I couldn't get to the back of them to program them. And so I thought, okay, instead of drilling tons of holes, and that was before West Mountain and some others had come out with the USB connectors and stuff that they have now. Like this one here has USB connectors now that you can buy, that you just drill a hole. Back when this one was originally built, those didn't exist. They hadn't come out with them yet. So I went with the keystone method, and you can see the USB ports here. My mic one right now is missing for my P25 radio, but any one of these, you can get all kinds of connectors that go in keystone holes.
Monoprice.com.
Maybe you'll put that on the website too. But anyhow, the USB, something to think about, not only with your interconnection of all your TNCs and modems and sound cards and antenna tuners, you need to have all those, securely mounted inside and managed and everything. But what about power to external of the box? Say you're on an extended event and you do have cell phone service and your phone's going down. That's why I put the USB ports. Those are strictly for charging other people's phones. I can't tell you how popular these things are when this thing goes on events and everybody can plug in their phone and charge it and everything along with everything else. These right here are USB ports, but those are for programming. And when I say this was previously built so I could program externally, yes, this thing at one time had 4 serial to USB converters in it, because each one was dedicated to one of these ports, so I could plug into it and program the radio. Now it's done through USB, and I just program everything through the front of here, how it's set up now. But once upon a time, everything came out, and these would be labeled Yaesu 8800 or whatever, and I knew I could plug into that, and I knew there was already a converter there, and I didn't have to carry one, and it would program. The other thing is this one used to have the TNC and everything in here, and I had a connector that came out so I could hook an external GPS to it, and it could sit on top of the box, and for APRS or whatever the heck they may want. But that's something to keep in mind. External power, I can supply power to someone else, a light, another box like John's box. If we forget the power strip, he can plug into me and I can provide him power. It's switched power. All my 110 on this thing is switched by this switch right here. So if I turn that switch off, not only does the 12 volts get killed from the power supply, but all my external power gets shut off. And it was built more of a safety feature, what I thought would be a safety feature, but it's really hasn't turned out to be necessary. But that's about it with designing the boxes. Is there any questions about designing them? Thought process?
You were talking about trying to mount that power strip with the rig runner. Do you just screw that straight to the case, or is there a bracket?
Mine actually has ears on the end of it, and mine's actually screwed to one of my shelves. Remember, I mentioned that mine actually has 2 half shelves that are mounted right here going that away, and it holds my power supply, and it holds my USB port replicator thing. All those things are strapped down, either screwed through the bottom or have straps built around them. And
some of those I found, I know on my 8 port, you can put them on the back rail. You may have to enlarge the hole a little to actually screw them down on the back rail, and then the solar controller on the back rail.
yeah, and this one doesn't have, this is an earlier one. This one doesn't have anything. Is this actually a rig runner, or is it a knockoff?
That's one of the Chinese knockoffs.
That's a knockoff. That's why it doesn't have anything. Okay. The rig runners, as far as I know, most of them come
They all have it.
with the ears now, so you can hard mount them. But yeah, you do. So, but anyhow, that's about it. I mean, if you have any other questions about the design, feel free to ask. So let's talk. I'm
Are
sorry?
there any grounding considerations for minimizing ground loops with audio and data and power altogether?
On mine, I keep everything separate, but every one of the shelves is grounded to a common point. I don't bond or ground the radio chassis themselves, because I believe that between the mounting screws to the bracket and the bracket to the shelf, that's good enough and I do scrape the paint off the shelf where my bolts go through, just to minimize it. And then I bond each shelf has a jumper that goes to a master ground bar. This box does not have an external ground point. This one does, this right here. If I have HF, I put ground points on there. I don't always use it, but I have it. But that's actually a ground, and the wing nut is in my toolbox because it keeps vibrating off. And so I can put a ground, and I carry about 50 feet of usually number 10 green, and I use that to clip to a ground source if I have one. I don't carry a ground rod and an impact hammer and all that to drive it into the ground. It's just that if I have a grounding source, I'll ground. And I don't rely on the center screw of an outlet to ground, just like some people. You know, that is a grounding point if the yoke of the outlet is grounded. Nowadays, most of them aren't. So, so anyhow, that's your design criteria, what to keep in mind. You know, power, structural integrity, wire management, weight. Keep those things in mind. Now, for some things for deploying. What does it take to deploy these things? Originally, when this one was built, this panel had my operating instructions and everything in it, and the other panel would have a canvas bag that had power cords, microphones, everything it took for this thing to operate itself, less the antenna and cable and stuff like that. That was a separate bag. That's been outgrown. It doesn't work anymore. Through trial and error, I've learned that no matter where you show up and how long it's been operating, you're going to show up and you're going to be missing stuff. Nowadays, I carry, this toolbox goes with me. Keep in mind things that you need to carry. This is a diplexer. Hugely beneficial when you show up and you only have an X30 or an X50 antenna to tie into, and you operate two separate antennas. So I plug this thing in the back, they plug the coax into this, and we're up and running. I carry antennas. This is to get us on the DTRS system. Always carry an extra 1 or 2 power pole adapters so you can spread out power. Once again, this one carries not only 110 volts that I can share with John's rig or whoever else needs power, or an extension cord or a computer or whatever the case may be, but I can port out 12 volts also, up to 30 amps. So having this available so you can set it right here and plug in 2 or 3 other 12-volt items is handy. Having pre-built cables that have power poles on them that plug into this and go into 5-volt USB adapters or transformers, converters, whatever you want to call them. So if you don't have 12 USB charging ports, you can plug them in. It's endless what you can come up and build little jumper cables for and throw them in your box. It may be something that saves the day someday. You never know.
If you're
but
an event like that, having 5-volt charging stations is indispensable. You will have people lobbying when you have stuff.
Oh, you could get one of those PayPal strip readers for your phone. I'm serious. They will line up and they will pay you anything to charge their phone when you're on a command post somewhere. And that's the last thing they think of. They jump out of their car and they run in and say they're admin finance or they're freaking supply logistics or something like that. They don't think about anything other than their paperwork and their laptop, and they run in and they go, oh, my phone's dead.
It's like that, full of those chargers that goes with the trailer.
Oh.
You cannot believe the people that come out of the Uber.
But, you know, carry microphones. Biggest thing you can carry is antenna adapters. Whether you go to ham radio outlet and grab one of those little cases, well, they cost $80 or something, and have the little multi-pieces so you can configure any kind of adapter you could ever want to, from SMA to TNC to BNC to N to PL259, SO239, all those things. The kit's nice. It seems a little lossy to me. I don't know what your opinion is, John. I would prefer true adapters.
It's okay in a pinch.
So in a pinch, it does work. Yeah, I'll give it that. It does work in a pinch. But I usually carry all of that in here. This is kind of a mess right now. I carry some antennas, carry all my microphones, and some other things. But unless you carry minimal amounts of supporting accessories for these things, you'll need a toolbox or something, or a bag. It can be a backpack, whatever. So to deploy, let's say we get called out on a snowstorm and you're going to a shelter and you're going to set up communications at the shelter and you're going to take along your PODCOM. And so what other than the PODCOM do you need to carry to deploy these things? Well, they're pretty self-contained. You have your little toolbox, or you have them in your back case covers or whatever. You get there, you uncase it, plug in your microphones, whatever you may need. What else do you need to make this thing work? You need a power cord, or you need cords to jump into 12 volts or whatever. So, tripods, antennas, cable. There you go, power cords, that's the main thing. Always carry power cords, or extension cords. Personally, I carry a 100-foot number 12 wire. It's good for 20 amps, continuous, 100 volts. You have very little power drop or voltage drop over the 100 feet, and they work good. And they cost about $90.
What an outlet strip, because a lot of the times you're good there and everybody's got the one or two outlets, so you may want to end up.
Yeah, carry a power strip that plugs into your extension cord. A question was brought up during the break. What about oh crud, I'm losing train of thought. Who asked me that question about transient problems? Surge protection. Okay, I carry a couple of power strips when this thing usually goes out. I carry the extension cord, like I said, 12 wire, 100 foot, heavy duty, construction grade. And I carry several power strips. One of the power strips I always carry is surge protected. Will that save you? I don't know. Opinions vary. But I carry it anyhow, mainly because out on incidents and everything, power is usually not very stable. Not very stable at all. If you're running off a genset, I'll guarantee you it's not very stable at all. It's lots of noise. And those MOV capacitors and everything inside those things do smooth out the noise in the power. You may never see it, but they do smooth out the noise. And the noise I'm talking about is the noise that's riding on the voltage that the voltage creates as it's pushing the amps down the wire. And so that noise, they do help soften and lessen, and so your equipment will run better. I mean, you'll never notice a difference, but it does happen. The other thing is just in case the generator kicks over or the power goes out and then snaps back on, just a little bit of protection to protect your investment here and also to keep you communicating. So it's a good idea to carry one of those. The next thing is you're going to have a pack of coax and an antenna, tripod. If you get some of these MFJ tripods or military tripods, there's several other people that make them that have the pole that goes out the middle and is adjustable. Whether it goes up 20 feet or goes up 6 feet, it doesn't matter. Carry one for your antenna. And even if you just take it out the front door and stick it out on the grass, it's 6, 7 feet up and it's in the clear and it's not inside the metal building. This building's built of metal. So what's that?
Gaffer's tape.
Yeah.
Don't forget your gaffer's tape. That's very important.
So you need to carry that. You need to carry your accessory box for setting everything up and your laptops, whatever you may need. One thing I forgot to show you, this one right here has a drawer in it. If you have the room, it's heavier and shit, but that is the handiest freaking thing. you can put on one of these things, in my opinion. That's where my laptop goes. And it has foam inserts that fit which laptop I'm taking, so I can set the foam insert in there and I can set the laptop in there. And generally there's enough room for the power cord and the transformer and everything to go in there. And that's one other reason why there's an outlet on the back, so I can plug my laptop in to to a power source. And you may look at it and say, okay, why would I have that? And then I carry this bag too. Well, I have a dedicated radio laptop that runs FT8 and it has every piece of programming software I own, which is probably close to 100. So I can program radios and everything else. And it's pretty much dedicated to this box. It doesn't live in the box because I use it for programming every day when I need to program stuff. But it's basically a radio laptop. It's super thin HP and it slides in there. The foam goes around it. It doesn't bounce around at all. And if you have the room in your design, spend the money for a drawer. It's handier than hell. Especially, even if you don't use it for a laptop, say you keep all your ICS forms, your manuals, your operating manuals, or whatever. I think it's one of the best things you can put in one of these things. And but like I say, it does make it heavy. The drawer is heavy, and it's kind of expensive also. So that's really about it. You got anything to add, John? Willem?
Again, it's a little bit off topic, but I have one of those Generac IQ 2000s.
Uh-huh.
Great generator.
Right.
Kills that chicken. Because it has one of those inverters in it. It creates all kinds of noise up to about 3-4 megahertz. There's a QST article from maybe about 3 or 4 years ago that actually recommends buying one of these filters, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's basically a noise filter to clean up that power, and you just put it right at the outlet to the generator. It makes the world of difference. It makes HF usable. It's basically 8 meters.
That's a good point to bring up. If you're deploying, if you go to Harbor Freight or Home Depot and you buy one of these generators, exactly what you're saying is going to happen. Those things aren't sine wave generators. They're not inverter-based generators generally. And what they're armature-based, magnetic-based generator systems, because they're cheap to build. And they're noisy, they're cheap to build, and they're electrically noisy, just like you said. That surprises me on the Generacs. I thought they would have cured that a long time ago, being owned by Onan and all that stuff, and being a top-line generator. That's surprising, but that's good to know. So if you're going to operate with one of those, look into these noise filters they're called transient line filters. And transient line means transient signals on the AC lines of your power.
You'll see that on a lot of generators. We had a Honda 3 kilowatt in our old trailer. It was one of the nice EV3000 IS inverter generators. Pretty expensive, almost $3,000. It had birdies all up and down the HF, and they pretty much didn't have any birdies in their field days. So what we found out was their part, extend the lead a little bit to go to the outlets on the front of it and put some ferrite cores in there, wrap the wire about 8 or 10 turns inside them, zip tie it down really good, and bolt the thing back together, and now there's no more noise. But that's the kind of thing that you're going to have to worry about when you're in this situation and you're remote. You never know what you're going to run into. So spending a little bit of money on the front end to get yourself some good filtering is always worth your time.
Since we brought up the topic of generators, the Hondas, as most of you probably know, make a great line of generators, and they really do. They're one of the industry leaders in portable. We're talking portable generators here. We're not talking about fixed mounted generators. Okay, the Hondas are fantastic. However, they're expensive. Their cost is basically $1 a watt. So if you want a 3,000 peak load or a 3,500 peak load generator from Honda, you're going to pay $3,000. If If you want one of their 6500s, you're going to pay about $6,200 the last time I saw.
They're down to $4,000.
Well, they've come down significantly then.
$7,000 for the trailer after the last one got stolen, and it was right at $4,000.
Okay, then they've come down some, but for generally what most hams would look into buying, like one of their 2500s or their little 1200s, which are the little ones that they can actually be paralleled with multiple ones. But you're looking at $1 a watt.
Yeah.
They're expensive, but they're good. But they're good. Recently on the market, something to look at, I personally played with one or two of them, and I'm looking to grab one just for the heck of it, is Energizer has come out with a line of generators. And they make all different sizes. And they make some that are true sine wave. They make some that are the typical square wave. But we're looking at the modified or the true sine waves. They have one that's called the EVA or something like that 2000. If you live down near Parker, or you're ever down near Parker, or if you're in a place that has a Murdoch's nearby, Murdoch's is a dealer for them. Take a look at them. It's compact like the 1200 series. Same, they're electric start. I don't know if the 1200 series is electric start. They're pull. But this one's, surprisingly enough, is electric start. It puts out 2,500 watts peak, which will run your ham station. It carries a 240 volt outlet at 30 amps, which it doesn't quite make full 30 amps, but it can in a pinch for a few minutes. Great little generators. They're highly reviewed, and they just came on the market maybe 6-8 months ago. And they make bigger ones. They make 6500s, and they make an 8000. And all electric start. They make dual fuel. So if you take it camping and you want to run off your propane tanks, you flip a switch, and the damn thing runs off propane instead of gas. Nifty idea. 50 amps. That's the 8000 and the 6500 do that. And but they also run 50 amps. So if you run a camper that's 50 amps or 30 amps, look into them. They're cheap. $500 at Murdoch's for the they're $539 or $569 at Murdoch's for the 2500, the EVA 2500. Great generators for field day, for your portable use, for backup use. It'll run your house, it'll run your refrigerator, it'll run your furnace in a pinch. The 2500 will. Yeah.
There's also a Murdoch's in Littleton and one in Westminster.
Sure, there is, but they are a dealer. So anywhere there's a Murdoch's, there's one in Longmont. You can get, yeah.
What was that unit called that Will was referring to? You just plugged directly into that outlet?
What was the brand name that you had?
I can't remember. It's the one that they recommend in the QST article. If you send me an email, I'll send you the link for it.
What's it called?
They're transient line filters is what they're considered. That's what their trade, in the trade, is the electrical trade they're called. What they're called in the consumer world, I couldn't tell you.
They're not too cheap. I mean, I think it was, I paid like $50 for one that will do 30 amps.
What size is your generator? Your gen set?
Kilowatt generator, but I oversized it for putting on a real generator someday.
No, what's the one you have now? I was just curious.
It's an IQ 2000.
Oh, okay, 2000, okay. So,
They're nice in the sense that, they'll throttle down, so they'll run at a low RPM, so the gas will last forever.
mhm.
And the inverter that basically puts out 60 hertz, and that's the thing, because it's not a sine wave, it's just noisy as hell.
Yeah, if you're looking into something, at least if you can afford a generator, and this Energizer is telling you about in the Hondas, they're inverter generators. What that means is they don't have the engine turning a generator. Okay, they have the engine in them is turning an alternator or whatever it may be that creates 24 or 48 volts, and then they have pure sine wave or modified sine wave, depending on how much you choose to spend, inverters in them. If you're looking for a serious radio operation-based generator, and also one to use for backup for your house or whatever, make sure it's modified or pure sine wave generator, and that it's an inverter type generator. Don't.
Harbor Freight, they've claimed to have an inverter now, but it's Harbor Freight.
They do, but just check and see if it's, look for whether it's modified sine wave or pure sine wave. A modified sine wave has square edges. It looks like stair steps. If you look at it on a scope, the sine wave of the hertz of the power, a standard magnetic generator puts out square. It's because it's on or it's off. That's what, there is nothing else. It's on or not, it's off. Same thing with the inverter. It's on or it's off. They do it by switching technology, and they switch the capacitors and the rectifier circuit and everything, and it's just up and down, up and down. If you go with a modified sine wave, it's a stair step. They're still turning on and off, but it's turning on and off like a switching power supply that you use in your ham shack so quickly that it starts to look like a sine wave. However, if you break it down in the time domain of an oscilloscope, you'll see the steps. Okay, a pure sine wave is just that. It's a pure sine wave just like you see from the power company. So,
You want a sine wave or a modified sine wave?
Modified if you can't afford the sine wave. The sine waves are considerably more, but they're coming down in price.
They're getting better. They're almost comparable now, but I would say they're 30% more.
Yeah, back when pure sine wave and modified sine wave, when pure sine wave hit the market, it was 2, 3, 4 times more expensive. It's come down considerably. There's probably a 30% spread, 25, maybe 40% in some markets. But if you can afford the pure sine wave, go with it. If you can't, then at least get a modified. A standard sine wave, a standard magnetic or a non-sine wave inverter can damage some radios. Most of them are protected now from it, but there was a time.
Equipment out there that do not deal well with modified.
Yeah, if you have a Weller soldering iron, the big gun ones, I'll tell you from experience, a non-modified sine wave will burn it out in a second. It'll smoke it. So, yeah, I smoked mine.
Make sure you test your equipment before you take it out. You don't know how it's going to be. It's very unpredictable. You get what you can. That's one of the reasons that kit runs almost all the time at my house doing something, because I always know it's working. If I need it, I grab it.
Yes.
Do you ever find that you need or use or any kind of like external lighting or besides the flashlight?
Oh, heck yeah. All the time.
Okay.
With LED being so prevalent nowadays, go down to Harbor Freight, go down to Murdoch's, they both carry them. Go down to Home Depot, they have all kinds of LED, 12 volt based or 110 volt based portable lights that you can hang from walls. They have light sticks. They have, you can, if you go to Amazon, there are lights like you see in patrol cars, that their little light that they have that's on a gooseneck, a flexible gooseneck. I've seen them mounted on these things. They mount them right here and they come out.
Those are handy then?
They have them in USB. You can put a USB port right there, plug it in, and because they run off 1.5 volts.
What I found is some LEDs. They're just like a strip, like you can put on for lighting on cabinets and whatever that are 12 volts. And it just kind of sticks to it, and you can put a switch on it and light up the whole front.
Oh yeah, isn't it Scott's that has the LED strip tape?
The LED strip.
Yeah, Scott has that on his, and he has this.
Auto Price sells the gooseneck USB ones for like $8.
Oh, go to Avtech in Wheat Ridge, and you can get them for 19 bucks, the professional grade that they put in the patrol cars that snap into the USB port, and you have light. They're super lightweight. They're super thin. The gooseneck is maybe this thick. Great. Or you can get them from where you're talking about. Avtech is a patrol car outfitter. They outfit all the emergency vehicles in Denver area, and they're in Wheat Ridge right off 44th by the cemetery there in the truck stop. So 44th and I-70. So was there another question?
That curiosity article I was referring to it's called A Look at Gasoline-Powered Inverter Generators by Mark Wilson, K1RO. It's the June 2012 QST. And the filter he recommends is called a Form of Charlie Oscar Romeo, Charlie Oscar Mike. That's what I want.
And it works fantastic. But you need to put it as close to the output of your generator as possible.
Yeah, with the generator, it's a little hard to get in there, so I just put it straight at the outlet.
It also helps too, in that case, to go find yourself a big donut toroid and wrap a couple of wraps of your extension cord really close to the generator through it. That will stop a lot of the radiated noise down that long antenna you have laying on the ground.
That's a good point. I've seen documents about people that carry the big toroid and they build themselves a short jumper extension cord. They cut a piece off and they wrap it through the toroid and put the appropriate cord caps on each end, and they carry it in their cold box. And if there's a generator running, they plug it in first, and then they plug the real extension cord. That's a good point. There's guys that do that.
Those big donut toroids are like $20, and it'll save your event.
Yep. That's a good idea. That's a good point. I remember reading about that. But carrying one of those, it's, you're talking probably 10 foot of extension cord, but the extension cord will only be, the pigtail will only be about 3 or 4 feet long after it's all built. And they work great.
The first day I took that too, had that problem, and I just took the extension cord, just wrapped it in the cord. I already helped a little bit. Wasn't great, but.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Go ahead.
Yeah, all this is great. Radio's cool, but in all things handmade, it always matters. Can you recommend what kind of antenna we should be looking at?
We could have another class just on the antennas.
Taking it in the context of PODCOM, right? I mean, at the end of the day, of course, we can string the wire out. Yeah, I get all that.
Depends on what you're trying to do.
Okay.
We have a sea container over in storage that I know that you've seen that's full of antennas. And the reason that it's full of antennas is because you never know what you're going to need. It depends. I have an X30 and a tripod that I take out to do VHF and UHF. I have a screwdriver that I take out to do HF. It's a tar heel antenna with the motor drive in it, and I'm going to do a tripod. That's good for HF. If you're trying to do something for, say, Mars, and you want something really wide-banded, you're looking at a resistive, like, terminated folded dipole. It's called a T2FD. That is pretty much wideband from 1.8 to 30, and it doesn't need a tuner. You can hang it up in a tree or stretch it between a couple of buildings. You're looking at a couple of $100 for the antenna, but then that solves a whole lot of issues that you have with tuning. But it's not a very high gain. It's not a very high gain antenna, but in most cases, when you're trying to do that, you don't really need it. But it also depends on what you're trying to talk to. Like the Mars guys are using frequencies that we don't use, and they're all oddballs, so they can't really use our antennas. So what do? Tar heel screwdriver antennas doesn't matter because they'll tune everything. But you gotta have something small that fits in your car that you can deploy. It's not guys, most guys don't drive around with a 27-foot trailer full of radio crap. So,
yeah, just to build, I mean, what I carry in my arsenal, just myself, is I carry an X30. I carry the same tripod, I believe, as you do. I have 2 of them, actually. I carry one of these dual band.
Speaker tripods.
Yeah, they're just speaker tripods. So,
if you get on Amazon, $50 for a pair of tripods in a bag. They're cheap.
Oh yeah, definitely get the bag because some of your antennas and stuff you can put in there. But I mean, I carry an X50 with tripod. I also carry one of these dual band Cushcraft 2-meter 440 beams, 3-element and 4-element beam that I can put up on the same tripod or the other tripod.
Arrow.
And arrow, you can carry arrow. But I carry a G5RV for HF that I can take if I need it. But I also carry one of these multi-band dipoles, 80 through probably 6. My tuner tunes at the 6, but I forget who makes it, DX Engineering or whatever, that has the 12-gauge gray wire, and it looks like a panel, a fan dipole. I carry one of those.
Harris RF 1944. It's 1.8 to 30 megahertz resistive dipole. It will do anything you put into it. it
Yeah.
doesn't care.
That antenna's cool.
It's fantastic.
If you can find one or want to pay for
They're
it.
$300. They're military surplus, and they come in a bag about like this. And it's everything to set up your antenna, including the grounds and the paracord to tie it all up. But there's a reason it's that expensive. I mean, the federal government paid millions and millions of dollars probably to design it and for Harris to package it up.
Yeah.
But if you can find them, you can find them new. The one that I ended up with was right at $300, including shipping. But that is an emergency antenna that will do everything HF.
And then there's another manufacturer, and HRO has them, and I just became familiar with them the other day, and it's working really well actually. And I think they're called Chameleon or something like that. Chameleon.
Yeah.
They make the base balun contraption that can be configured many different ways once you buy the base part, and it's all structurally built with 3/8 24 threads, so you can thread either end on mobile antenna mounts or whatever. But they come in a bunch of configurations, from in-fed slopers and dipoles and whatever you can make, and it's all based on this balun thing that they sell for about $180 or whatever. But what's cool about it, they also have one of these vertical antennas that has the springy paracord in it, and the thing folds up and has a little piece of Velcro that wraps around it. And when you pull that Velcro off and whip it out, it goes and it snaps together, and it's about 30 feet long. But it screws into the base of this balun, which can be hard mounted on a mount on, say, your bumper, your fifth wheel, or a portable base that you carry with you, and a couple of paracord links of paracord for your guys. And you can stick that thing up in the air, and they say it will tune 160 to 6 meters. They have a version that actually they claim will tune from 160 or 80, something like that, to 440. And I haven't tried it out, but I do have their balun, and it is in an in-fed dipole type, or an in-fed long wire configuration, and it works fantastic for 80 and 160.
I carry an Arrow dual band satellite antenna, which is VHF on one polarity and UHF on another. Folds up into a bag about that big and about that long, and makes an adapter for about $20 that'll mount you to a tripod. And that goes with me wherever I go. So if I need it, I can hook it to that. You've got UHF and VHF from that. And most of you guys probably have an Arrow in your closet that you don't even think about. It's good to have.
So, but there's some ideas for antennas. I mean, it's endless. So,
Call it a chameleon?
Is that right, Chameleon?
Chameleon antennas.
Yeah, look them up. They have some interesting ideas. They're pricey as can be, but there's some good ideas.
Copy of that, that's 1944 also, that I have, it works great.
Did they make that? Chameleon?
Yep.
It's a copy of the dipole. It's basically a dipole with a 12-to-1 balun in the middle and some 500 ohm resistors at the end of it with down leads to go to ground rods. And it's 180 feet long. I think it's 90 each side, so it takes a lot of room, but you'll talk on any band 1.8 to 30.
Yeah, Chameleon's version, slightly different terminating resistors at the end of each dipole leg. It's 60-foot legs on each side of the dipole, so it's a little bit more compact. But I think they must use some gold plating because it's about $400.
You can find the Harris's on eBay for $300, and they're phenomenal.
Well,
As David mentioned, I swear by the G5 RVs, if you're going to be in any spot and you're going to work HF for longer than an hour, put it up. It's a great idea to bring one of those catapult launchers or something like that with you.
Yep.
So you don't have to climb freaking trees.
Burkhardt brings potato launcher with him for that. So.
yeah, potato launcher's the only way to go. Plus, it's fun. The slingshot's all right, but it's not fun. Unless you're shooting something else with it afterwards. Any other questions, comments, suggestions, anything?
That is the catapult, it's not that big.
Well, that wraps it up unless Willem or John have something. Thanks for coming. Hopefully we shed some light on some thoughts of what you need to think about when you're planning your own. So, all right? Yep.